Chapter 4. Suri! The landscape flashed by. First fields, then stretches of dry plains, then forests. Slowly, the train climbed ever further north towards Skirt. It glided silently along the magnetic track, occasionally plunging into long underground tunnels. Suri welcomed the darkness. It gave her eyes a chance to rest, but it also meant she could see her own reflection in the window. She looked tired, worn out. She turned away and reached for the bottle of water on the table. The moment she'd ended the call, Suri had booked the first ticket she could get. There hadn't been a private compartment available. She had travelled through the night, changing trains in Romesti shortly after dawn before continuing north towards Skirt. A large scarf and dark sunglasses had kept the curious stares at bay when she'd boarded at Florenza station. But after the change in Romesti, and by the third stop on the Northern Line, the man sitting opposite finally realized he was sharing the compartment with the Suri. As discreetly as he could manage, he lowered his newspaper, slipped out his phone, and took a photograph. It wasn't discreet at all. "Please don't," Suri said. The man looked embarrassed. "Sorry, my friends would never believe I'd shared a compartment with you." Then he pressed the button anyway. Suri sighed. This was going to be a long journey. The man launched straight into conversation. "My name's Isaac Versbellum. I'm from Yosha." He held out his hand. "I'll shake your hand if you delete the photo," Suri said flatly. Isaac lowered his hand. "I'm a logistics officer. My mother's a witch, and my father has fee blood. Not much," he added with a grin, "but enough. So I do too." Suri looked at him. There was a smear of yogurt on his cheek. At least, she assumed it was yogurt. She turned back to the window. "You know, it's incredibly rude to take photographs of people without asking. I'd appreciate it if—" "I actually think you look prettier in the magazines," Isaac interrupted. "You're much shorter in real life, and your hair looks completely different." It was never acceptable to do this. She would probably regret it later. But the emotions of the previous evening, the frantic rush to buy a ticket, the grief over losing her brother, it was all too much. Suri placed both hands against either side of Isaac's head. "Sleep. Deeply." Isaac didn't even have time to look startled. His head tipped backwards, his mouth fell open, and within a second he was fast asleep. Suri stood up. With some pushing and pulling, she maneuvered him into what she hoped was a reasonably comfortable position, his head resting against the compartment window. She picked up his phone, took one of his fingers, and unlocked it. What the hell? 40 photos. Apparently she'd only caught him after he'd already spent several minutes enthusiastically snapping pictures. There was even a close-up of her sandals, and her chipped toenail polish. Good grief. Once she had deleted all the footage, she took a photo of her middle finger and slipped his phone back into his jacket pocket. They emerged above ground again. The afternoon light shone brightly through the window. By now, Suze must have seen her parents' bodies, and Suri had not been there for her. She had already called her brothers, the family's solicitor, and she had even spoken to the King's Commissioner himself. By this time, the newspapers must have caught wind of it. Once she reached Skirt, chaos would probably already have broken loose. But nothing was faster than this train. There was nothing she could do but wait. At the station, she had bought a new phone and added credit to it. She had sent the number to her brothers and the family solicitor. Her other phone was switched off. She had already sent Suze a few messages and called twice. But her niece had turned off her phone, presumably for the same reason as Suri had. When something major happened within the family and people found out, the messages and calls became impossible to escape. It drove you mad. Suri rummaged through her bag for a roll of mints, but her hand found something else instead. Her diary. She opened it. What was she supposed to be doing today, other than sweating in the manor? Lunch with Kian. Kian was the son of her gardener, a handsome man somewhere in his late 20s. He had come along with his father when there had been a great deal of pruning to do one day. That had been 2 weeks ago. She had watched him from behind the thick grey satin curtain, like some desperate old spinster. The flowers in the afternoon sun were not the only thing that had been dry for quite some time, she had joked silently to herself. She had rather deliberately positioned herself on a sun lounger with a book, making sure she would be noticed. When he spotted her, he had wandered over to her and started a casual conversation. She had laughed with him and, when they had finished and his father was about to leave, she had rather obviously asked if Kian would mind helping her hang some shelves on the first floor. His father had simply shrugged and left. She had first offered him a glass of water, purely for appearances, and chatted with him in the kitchen. Then she had walked ahead of him, leading him towards the shelf that supposedly needed to be straightened. He had touched her carefully, almost casually, his fingers brushing gently over her back. She had turned around and stood on her toes, whispering in his ear that the shelves could wait. He had needed no further encouragement. Clothes had been half discarded, and with his trousers around his ankles, he had pushed her against the wall. She had wrapped her legs around him and whispered encouraging words into his ear. Slowly, he had entered her, but her provocative words had pushed him beyond restraint, and he had continued with a rough, uncontrolled urgency until it was over. She had enjoyed provoking him like that, and afterwards watching him pull his trousers back up, his face flushed. When they parted, she had given him her number. That same evening, she had received a message from him. After some back-and-forth flirting, they had agreed to meet for lunch sometime. Suri had saved his number on her other phone. She sighed and switched it back on. It immediately started ringing. She dismissed the call from an acquaintance and quickly typed a message to Kian, apologizing. 49 missed calls and 27 messages. She switched the phone off again. She breathed in shakily and let it out slowly, again and again, but she could not seem to calm herself.